to the Festival
of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, my name is Jim TENEYCK. I'm the author of The Life and Times of Walter Reuther, An Unfinished Liberal Legacy. I wrote the book about 5 or 6, well, more like 7 or 8 years ago by now. It's been published for a number of years, but I'm a rather shy person, and I haven't really advertised it or done much to promote it. I've been excuse me, I was as an undergraduate in college at Lafayette in Eastern Pennsylvania. I was a mathematics major. I was fortunate in being able to take a lot of liberal arts courses also while I was there, particularly courses in English and literature and in history. I went to work after graduation for IBM in Endicott, New York. And I was there for about 4 or 5 years, and was taking courses in an IBM extension program that they had with Syracuse University. And at some point, I decided I was going to take a leave of absence and go back to go to Syracuse and finish a master's degree. And once I was there, I decided that my leave of absence would become permanent, and I went on for a PhD in physics with my specialties in quantum electrodynamics. I graduated. I hit the job market, which wasn't very good at that particular time, and I taught at a number of different colleges throughout the eastern part of the United States, in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Worcester, Massachusetts. And at some point, I also made a transition from physics into computer science. So I was teaching computer science at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, where I had a permanent job. I was tenured, and I retired about 11 or 12 years ago. Trying to count the days, maybe in 2007, I think, is when I retired. After retirement, I wanted to change career and do something a little bit different. So I was always interested in writing. I always thought I was rather good at it. And I decided I was going to write this book. I chose the book subject, Walter Reuther, He was sort of a hero of mine when I was growing up. I grew up in Somerville, New Jersey, which was at that time, I'm not sure exactly how it is now, but that was a fairly Republican town. My parents were Republicans, and I know I was marching around Somerville with a big "I Like Ike" button, on my, on my jacket or my shirt and so forth. Uh, at some point, uh, after I started uh, after I started college, I became quite disillusioned with um, the Republican Party at that time, especially with the candidacy of Barry Goldwater. And I think I felt that whatever the family values that were being displayed there, they weren't mine. Uh, I I I remember watching the March on Washington event. I remember, that among the speakers, besides John Lewis and Martin Luther King, the one notable white speaker there was Walter Reuther. Uh, and so it sort of became natural from there that I would eventually write this book. I felt compelled to write the book because, I felt that the word liberal was being used in a very derogatory, sense. It was used as basically an epithet or something against people of this persuasion, and it wasn't being defended at all or adequately by the other political party. So that was part of the motivation for writing this book. Uh, if we can put up the contents now for a second. Okay, unfortunately, I'm a macular degenerate, so I'm not really able to read what we have on the screen right now. But I remember the list, and I just wanted to display it for the audience. Um, The book is about the life and times of Walter Reuther. It's a fairly lengthy book. It's a quite lengthy book, and it involves a lot more about the times, more so than a straight biography of Reuther. There are other biographies of Reuther, some of them that are good, and more specifically, a biography of the individual. I was looking at the individual as a focus point for the times in which he lived, and much of which I have lived. Uh, he, he was involved in pretty much all of the major activities of this period: the labor movement, the civil rights movement. He was involved globally on the global stage. He traveled to India basically as a representative of the United States at the time. He traveled. He had contacts with the leaders of Western Europe, Israel. He had confrontations with Mikoyan and later Khrushchev that are documented or that are described in the book. And he was also known as the Plan Man. He had plans for at the start of World War II. He had the plan 500 planes a day. He noticed that when he was traveling to work, he was passing a Packard plant that was being built that was going to be used for building airline components. And he saw that with the Battle of Britain already raging, that by the time that plant was finished, it would possibly be too late. So he devised a plan where he would use the we would pool the excess capacity of the auto industry at the time to be able to, what he said, to construct 500, fairly simple planes a day. So the idea was that it would be more the quantity as much as the quality of the capabilities, let's say, of these planes that could turn the tide of the fighting that was raging over Britain at the time. He was involved in a lot of the some of the different planning during World War II, solving particular bottlenecks. After World War II, he had a plan for converting the time, which seemed that we were going to be converting into a peacetime economy, for converting some of the aircraft manufacturing plants that weren't going to be used into plants for constructing prefabricated housing units. So housing was always a major concern of his. He had a plan after World War II that was the precursor of the Peace Corps. I think it was proposed in '49. It had the support of Eleanor Roosevelt, but it was, not really, not a lot of other support. It was through the UN. The initial plan was going to be through the UN. It wasn't going to be through the regular channels of the UN, but for those nations that were going to contribute. And the idea was to, we spent $100 billion, dollars, 1949 or 1941 through $45 in fighting the war. So his plan was to use that sum to, over a period of 100 years, and use an equal amount of money to promote peace through this plan of his. I refer to it mostly as the Noah's Ark plan, because it wasn't going to be the usual diplomatic representatives of the various countries that would want to be a party of this. But there would be two of various professions, two manufacturers, two labor representatives, to academics, to farmers, etc., up to a total of about 16 different people representing various segments of the contributing countries. It's okay now. I'm just going to remove the table of contents from the screen and go to it. So he was, that was, part of his appeal. Okay, just looking at the table of contents for a moment. I can't read the exact title, chapter titles right now. Chapter 1 was really one of the last chapters I wrote in the book. It starts with a tribute by Martin Luther King to Luther. It describes the details of the plane crash in which he died, and some of the aspects of his life that made him the person he was. It's a rather short chapter, and I felt it was necessary to put that in there because I don't get around to talking about Walter Reuther again until the middle of the which is now the third chapter of the book. The formative years. The formative years start as the formative years of labor. The different labor movements and different confrontation strikes, etc. And then the second half of that chapter would be the formative years of Reuther, his childhood, his early years in Detroit, etc. The second chapter is the one I was initially going to start with, which is the American century. Okay, the 20th century was now the American century, and there were a number of reasons for that. First of all, if we look at the 20-year span before and after the turn of the century, and in particular the last 10 years of that, it's really a leap into modernity. During that period, we have the internal combustion engine, the automobile is introduced. I initialized the the beginning of the auto age. In 1888, when Bertha Benz took the family car on a trip from her home in Mannheim to her mother's home in Pforzheim, or vice versa. I'm pretty sure I have the right direction. And then back. So it was a distance of about 120 kilometers. She went on one day, came back on the next. And during the trip, she had to stop along the way to get, they didn't have gas stations at the time. She used ethylene cleaning fluid that she would get at stores on the way. And of course, she drew a crowd of onlookers on the way. She came back by a different route. She had to make some repairs to the car during the trip. And when she got back, she told Carl that he needed another gear for the travel. But the publicity around that really was the first major event of the auto age. So the first American manufacturer, the initial manufacturers were, well, Benz, and he had it wasn't a rival. They didn't really know the existence of one another, but Daimler, who sold his patents to French companies Panhard and Renault. So they were really the first. Those three companies were the first manufacturers of cars. And about 1894, they would produce maybe 300 to 400 cars a year. The first manufacturer in America was Duryea, the Duryea brothers. And it wasn't until around 1900 that the major American auto manufacturer was Olds, the Oldsmobile. Come along with me, Lucille, in my merry Oldsmobile. It was one of the songs that was popular during that stretch. Henry Ford started out racing cars and set a world record, speed record for one of his models, and then was able to get. This was the usual way of what was happening. People would demonstrate their cars, usually by racing them, and then they would get backers to back them to start producing them. So Ford began racing cars, got backers, started producing the cars, and then got rid of the backers as soon as he could, so that he wasn't beholden to the whims of the financial interests that might be backing him. So it was about the 1908, you had the Model T Ford, and the automobiles were ubiquitous. So over that 20-year period from 1890 through 1910, you had the automobile. You also had, the phonograph was developed during this time. The Edison had his initial phonograph machine was on a disc. No, I'm not sorry, not on a disc, but on a coil, on a cylinder. His competitor, but the phonograph really didn't come into popular use until the beginning of the 20th century. It was the competitor's model, RCA Victor, that used the disc. I'll call it the vinyl disc. I'm not sure it was vinyl or exactly what the plastic disc was made of at the time, but that became popular, and it was a way of distributing music and American culture, that evolved quickly over the next few decades. So we had the phonograph, we had motion pictures developed in the 1890s, much of it in France, some of it in the United States with Edison. And by the middle of the 1900s, the 1905, 1910, you had the first movie theaters, the Nickelodeons, and you were beginning to get film producers producing full feature films. So it was a new form of entertainment, that changed the lifestyle of the public, not only in this country but around the world. You had the airplane. There wasn't the first flight by the Wright brothers was in 1903. There were other people developing flight at the time. One of which was a Brazilian Santos Dumont, Alberto Santos Dumont, who was from a French family. His father was the coffee baron in Brazil, so he was extremely rich. The coffee baron fell off his tractor at some point and was paralyzed, and so he moved back to France along with Alberto. So Alberto started off flying balloons. He would fly balloons around Paris. He could land some of these balloons and at various street side restaurants. He participated in a balloon race from, I think, the Champ. I'm not sure exactly where it started, but around the Eiffel Tower and back to the starting point, and he won that race. He was extremely rich. He was one of the first purchasers of a Panhard at the time, and he built his model of the airplane that was credited in Europe as the first flight. Looked more like a box cart, than it did of an airplane. I'm not even sure it made the first 120 foot journey like the Wright brothers did. But the Wright brothers were much more secretive. There was somebody that was filming their flights. And incidentally, on the first flight, there were other flights on the same day that were much longer. So although the first flight only went 120 feet, there were much longer flights. And then they took their plane back to Dayton. Improved it. And we're flying in the skies of Dayton, which was almost like the reports of airplanes flying in the skies around Dayton. It was outside of Dayton on a farm where they were living and were developing the flight. We're treated almost like flying saucer reports these days. When the Dayton newspaper, who was run by a man by the name of Cox, who became the presidential candidate in, I believe it was 1924, with Franklin Roosevelt on the ticket as his vice president. He lost, but the reporters weren't able to, the Wrights weren't able to fly on that particular day, given mechanical problems or weather or whatever. And so there was always the notion, flyers are liars. So the first real demonstration of the Wright brothers flight took place in Paris, where Wilbur brought the plane, flew it at a Paris air show, and was the hit of the air show. The French people that had originally dismissed his claims acknowledged that he invented the airplane, et cetera, and that they had done him wrong. 1 year later, the Wrights, I don't think the Wrights were there, but another American, Curtis, was the hit of the show. And by that time, there were about 30 or 40 different, between 30 and 40, it wasn't 40, but over 30 flyers that were displaying their fare. So from 1903 to 1910, we had, it was not only an experimental airplane making a flight of 120 feet, but there were production model airplanes that were flying, and in much the same way as Ford was racing his cars to get backing, these flyers were also looking for backing for developing their model. What else came into place? The wireless. The wireless was developed. The patent for the first wireless was given to Marconi. He made the transmission from Cape Cod to I'm not sure. I think it was somewhere in Ireland. That was receiving the signal. He was not necessarily the first person to develop wireless. The first, the physicist that demonstrated or proved, let's say, that electromagnetic signals could be transmitted, or signals could be transmitted by electromagnetic radiation was Hertz. Hertz didn't do anything to make that practical, but a number of other people worked on it, including Tesla, who was using a wireless device, much like a TV controller, to demonstrate how he could sail a boat around a tank that he was using at one of his displays. He was sending signals, from his lab in New York City or from his apartment in New York City up the Hudson to boats on the Hudson at the time. There were a number of others. There was an Indian scientist by the name of Bose, who was the father of, whose son, let's say, is the Bose that gave his name to the Bose-Einstein, statistical distribution. So there was more than just Marconi that was working on this invention. Marconi got a lot of boost from Edison because Tesla came to the United States initially to work with Edison. That relationship did not go very well, and they became bitter enemies. And Edison was supporting Marconi's claims over whatever claim Tesla might have had for the same invention. So there was this that was going on. The physics, in 1901, I believe, it was the original papers in quantum mechanics, Planck, that there was a number of breakdowns of classical physics at the time, which led to quantum mechanics. And in 1905, Einstein's papers on relativity, Brownian motion, he had a number of the photoelectric effect, which is what he won the Nobel Prize for. And in 1915, the general relativity, a new theory of gravity. So we have a new physics. We have all of this different, plunge into modernity, which translated over into literature and art at the same time. That's the backdrop. Now, why was the United States best suited to take advantage of this new of these new situations? Well, one was geography. We had a lot of the raw materials, in particular, a great source of iron ore, the Mesabi Range at the tip of Lake Superior in Minnesota, and a lake and river system that could get the iron and the coal, which was abundant in the Appalachian regions, to the mills, the steel mills. So abundant resources, cheap resources that could be mined, relatively less costly than elsewhere. Cheap transportation with the river system and the lake system to get it to where it needed to go. And the infrastructure, the railroads and so forth that were already in place to deliver it where it needed to be delivered to customers. So cheap resources, cheap transportation allowed for a costlier labor force. The labor could be, more money could go to labor, and that was an advantage at the time. So that was one. So geography. We had an entrepreneurial system, that promoted the rapid development of these industries. Oil. Initially, the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania, but the oil industry quickly moved to California. And when the automobile age was taking shape, large deposits of oil were found in the Permian Basin in Texas and around Tulsa in Oklahoma. So that was another natural advantage. And we had a skilled workforce. So given all those advantages, plus not having the disadvantage of World War I and World War II fought on our soil, which destroyed much of the infrastructure, the industry, and so forth in Europe and in Japan and China and in the Far East as well. America was left as the only industrial country left standing after World War II, in particular, that was capable of turning these advantages into a huge advantage that it had over the rest of the world. So this is the American century. I go into some of the voices in the turn of the century. I list them. I guess there's a second page to what's on the viewing screen right now. But I list them, and because I have quotes from them, etc., within the book. But these same voices are re-echoing today. So there are various voices saying a number of different things, but a lot of it is repeating some of the same things that are being expressed today. So that was the first chapter. The anticipated first chapter becomes chapter number 2. I already talked about the formative years of labor and the formative years of Reuther. One of the main events in the formative years of Reuther was, his father. His father, I won't go through the whole history, that's in the book. But one of the things that the father did was on Sunday afternoons, he always had a debating section with his sons. He had, Reuther was the third of 4 brothers, and then there's a much younger sister who sat in terror with his mother while these debating sessions were going on. So there would be a topic that would be given, usually something to do with current events or, labor issues. The father was quite involved in labor issues on his own right. And so he would say, okay, you have the affirmative and you have the negative, etc. And the boys went out to prepare, visiting the library, etc. They had to do the research to prepare their topic. And oftentimes the father would change the order, say, okay, I lied. You're taking the affirmative, and the other person unexpectedly is going to be taking the negative. I said, you have to know what the argument is of your opponent if you're going to be able to discuss it well and to be able to understand his point of view and convince him of yours. So that was part of their early training. These debating sessions, they got to the point where people in the press said that one of the brothers could start a conversation and the other one could finish it without missing a beat because of this. So that was the formative years. Then the next couple of chapters would be going into the labor history. The battle, sit down and fight, the start of the CIO. I mentioned, the difference between the AFL and the CIO. I won't get into that. I can talk about that more in future of these sessions. But it was the beginning of the CIO. It began basically with a punch where John L. Lewis, who was the leader of the miners' union, wanted to bait one of the AFL leaders, the leader of the, I believe, the Carpenters Union at the time. So he baited him until he called Hutchinson was the man's name. Hutchinson called Lewis a son of a bitch. And so Lewis got out of his chair and gave him a good swift punch to the jaw. And that was the birth of the CIO at that particular time. The auto workers were in what was called a federated union at the time. In other words, the AFL was always opposed to the industrial unions. So what it would do is, okay, we've got all these auto workers that want to be organized. We have to divide them up into their particular respective subunits, like the carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians, etc. So while they were working out the details of how this was going to be divvied up, which would have been disastrous for the industrial unions. Always proved disastrous for the industrial unions. The CIO the AUW, the Auto Workers Union meeting of 1936 was when they formed their own union. They kicked out the president that the AFL had imposed upon them and formed their own union. I'll get into what Walter Reuther's role was in that meeting. It led him to some prominence within the meeting itself, and I'll do that in a future one of these discussions. Okay, so the birth of the CIO, and then the first strike of the UAW. It wasn't exactly the first strike. I'll go into the details of how Reuther was given a position on the Auto Workers Executive Board, but it was an unpaid position, so he had no money, and was just left to fend on his own, which he did amazingly. He formed an amalgamated union of all the other unions that were within his territory, amalgamated it into one, and then picked a strike that he was going to win. He won much less than in the strike that he picked, but he got a foot in the door, and one of his expressions, a foot in the door agreement. So he got a foot in the door to get all of the other things that that they were asking for in the next or future bargaining sessions. As soon as that strike ended, there was the sit-down strike at Flint. So this is the sit-down and fight. The details of that I go into in more detail. One of the key participants in the Flint strike was a woman by the name of Genora Johnson. She later remarried, but Genora Johnson formed the Ladies Auxiliary. Woody Allen composed songs about the Ladies Auxiliary, and the Ladies Auxiliary were really very key to the auto workers winning that particular strike. So I have sit down and fight. Then the battle on the overpass. This was the organizing effort at Ford. If you go to if you look up Walter Reuther on Google and go to one of the sites that has the various pictures of him and of other people that were prominent in that time. There's the picture of Reuther and one of his compatriots at that point, one of his chief rivals, it became one of his chief rivals, by the name of, I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name was Frankenstein, not Stein, but Frankenstein. And he had been a football star at Akron College, I believe it was. And on the overpass, they were assaulted by Ford's, what they called Ford's service department, which was a bunch of thugs under the auspices of Harry Bennett, who was Ford's lieutenant in charge of keeping order within his plants, and were beaten severely. So you see the pictures. One of the pictures there would be the pictures of a battered and bruised Reuther and a bloody Frankenstein that had been beaten up on the overpass at that event. So that was one of the preludes of the battle at Ford. And much of the chapter is about Henry Ford himself. I will go into that in more detail also. So after we have that, the next one is the war years, I believe. Okay, so this is more not so much about how the war was fought, but what was happening on the home front and in the labor movement during the war years. Soon after the initial success at Flint, the Auto Workers Union did what management expected them to do. They got fighting among themselves, and there were two different groups. Within there are two different factions. One was the Progressives, and the other one was the Unity Caucus. So we had the Progressive Caucus and the Unity Caucus. The Progressive Caucus was the old line, conservatives, and the Unity Caucus were their opponents. That contained the communists, the socialists, some of the better of the labor organizers at the time. Walter Reuther was part of that group, but it was not unified around anything really. He was on the outs, quickly. Frankenstein was initially part of the Progressives, but switched sides and was part of the Unity Caucus. And there was always the tension between Frankenstein and Reuther as to both were very ambitious and both were looking to succeed up to the top. So we have the war years, what's going to happen, to the price controls and so forth at the end of the war, what the battles within the Union at that particular time, and much of it is that. And also part of the war, the war years begins with the re-election to the third term, the unprecedented re-election to a third term by Franklin Roosevelt and the machinations and so forth that went around that. So that was of interest to me. The next chapter, I can't read. So I'm just trying to remember exactly which order I have them in now. It was I believe it was the Treaty of Detroit. What happens the post-war years? The Treaty of Detroit was really about one particular labor contract that was negotiated between General Motors and the UAW. It was supposedly going to be a long-term 5-year deal to bring labor peace. It was after there was Reuther was the head of the GM division of General Motor of the UAW during the war years, let's say, and in the period immediately after. And he was the first one to go on strike. He had the strike all set. The slogan was "Show us the books." He was arguing for a 36 cents an hour wage increase, and said that the auto makers were able to afford such an amount and without having to raise the prices of automobiles. And he had a lot of public support lined up around it and so forth. They thought they were undercut because the steel workers went out on strike a little bit later and undercut their bargaining position. So in the end, he had to settle for basically what the steel workers got, and that was it. And so there was always a tension between autos and steel. They were formed differently. The auto workers the auto factories were run on an assembly line. So you could shut down an auto factory by just pulling a lever on the assembly line, stopping the assembly line, or pulling several levers to stop the assembly line, and go out and out on strike, or initially sit down on a strike. Whereas for steel, you had to tamp down the blast furnace, so you couldn't act so. Steel was formed by Lewis himself. He negotiated the agreement with the guy that was running, or basically not the management of U.S. Steel, but one of the big financial backer of the time behind it. And he just told his negotiators, "Here, take this paper off to see the president of the steel workers. I think his name was Fairchild at the time, and he will sign it." And that was it. He left him hanging dry. So it was always a top-down approach. Steel and autos were organized differently. They were created differently, and there was always some tension between them. So thanks. Somebody, Clive, increased the font size on this thing that I have on the screen. So let me see that I was right, that this was after the war years. We do have the labor battles and the Treaty of Detroit. Now, one of the main things in that is there were 3 assassination attempts on Walter Reuther that we know of. One almost successful. One, he just happened to turn around at the moment when the shot was about to be fired, and he got hit on the arm instead of directly in the back with a shotgun blast. It was thought, that he was laid up for a long time. The first attempt was back in 1941. During the struggles with the initial struggles at Ford before the war, and that was probably people that were within the different auto companies, particularly some of the shadowy figures in some of the auto companies, like Harry Bennett, that were behind it. There were 2 men that showed up at the door. They were going to take him on the ride. But it happened that they were celebrating, I think it was his brother's wife's birthday at the time. So there were a lot of people in Reuther's house. So they were surprised that he wasn't there alone or just with his wife. And they ended up, one of the guests ended up, managing to jump out of a window and running around to alert the neighbors. Sophie Reuther, Victor Reuther's wife, threw a vase or something at these people, and they ended up not knowing what to do and just left. The third attempt was around Christmas time. I think it was after the one that almost got him, and there was a bomb that was left in a Christmas package by the Union headquarters, and it was laden with explosives. It would have, if it had exploded, it would have, done the similar kind of damage that happened, in was it Salt Lake City, where the bomb was detonated, by McVeigh. I'm forgetting now, but it would have done similar kind of damage. It would have not only destroyed the Union headquarters there, but some of the surrounding buildings as well. Fortunately, that one didn't go off. The investigative, before I'm forgetting, Victor Reuther also was an attempt on his life, and was almost successful. He ended up losing an eye, and the investigations into both of those attempts were botched, maybe intentionally so. Particularly in the case of Victor's, whereas where the police investigator investigating the case owned, not under his name directly, but was the owner of a restaurant where much of the planning had originally taken place. So that was the Treaty of Detroit. The IBM chapter, the, that's there. That's probably the longest chapter in the book. The book is quite long. As I indicated at the beginning, I didn't really write all of these chapters, in numerical order. In fact, I decided I had changed my mind, a couple of times how I was going to place them. So this is the vanguard. In other words, the alternative to the unionized workforce could be something like IBM. IBM was the classic non-unionized workforce at the time. And IBM was extremely successful. So IBM could afford to be more generous, let's say, than some of the other companies that had less of an influence over their over their building than they could. So that lasted, the bulk of the 20th century. That IBM was this particular kind of a company. I have some interesting topics, in there, but I'm going to skip over them. Civil rights. Reuther was involved in the civil rights movement. He was very visible on the national stage, probably a little bit less visible within the auto workers unions themselves. I take up this discussion of civil rights starting with what was happening in Detroit. The shadow of Ford. Ford was a tremendous influence over the black community. He was the only employer that really readily tried to employ blacks. And, so he was looked at as a benefactor of the black community. And in turn, the black community turned out to be a benefactor of his. So there was, how does Detroit get out from the shadow of Ford? Some of the figures that were involved in the civil rights, discussions, the civil rights movements within Detroit. The older generation that was more under the wing of Ford, and the younger generation that was a bit rebellion to that. So there's that, and then it goes into the larger civil rights movement, the March on Washington, some of the events afterward, and Reuther's role. Both what was visible and what he did and what he didn't do. The Cold War. The Cold War. I talk about some of the major events, starting off with George Kennan, his prescription, the policy of containment. He was very clairvoyant at the time when he said that if the Soviet Union, let's say, was not able to expand, it eventually would just, die of its own, of its own, it would atrophy and die, basically. And that turned out to be pretty much what happened. He was the father of containment, although he was always an undersecretary or a deputy, etc., because he had a very abrasive personality. He didn't do very well as the man in charge, and he was the author of the policy of containment, but he always had a lot of complaints about how it was being exercised. Some much correctly so. So we look at some of the effects of the Cold War, what was going on in Central America, particularly Guatemala. I look at Iran, the the revolution against the Shah, and then the counter revolution that put the Shah back on the peacock throne. What the CIA's involvement was before, let's say, during and after, the revolution, the restoration, let's call it, of the Shah, and then into the some of the other things, the McCarthy hearings, the HUAC hearings, the hearings into labor racketeering that started off with the Teamsters and then tried to go after other unions like the UAW, and the and also Reuther's role at this point on the world stage. There was, Meany, George Meany was the head of the AFL-CIO at the time, made a comment, that he didn't consider Nehru and Tito at the time, who were the leading voices for the for the neutralist, the nations that didn't want to be part of either bloc, that wanted to remain neutral. They had different forms of government, but they didn't want to be part of the struggle between the two different main blocs. He basically said that Nehru was no neutral. You can't be neutral. You're either with us or against us. Basically, deeply offensive to India. So India was looking for some representative of the United States to try to come over and soothe the diplomatic relations. And given the first choice would have been Eisenhower, but given there was somebody else, it was to be the choices that they offered were either Earl Warren or Walter Reuther. So Reuther agreed to go. He had the urging of a Republican Senator John Sherman Cooper of Kentucky, I believe, at the time, who was quite friendly with Reuther, and so he went. It was like a 3-week or longer, trip through India, and that's detailed in the book. He also had developed friendships with the leaders of Western Europe, particularly the Social Democrats that were coming into power at that time, Willy Brandt, Wilson in England, the Erlander in Sweden, and also dragged Hubert Humphrey along to one of these conferences that were held at the Swedish Prime Minister's estate. And he, until Johnson found out and, forbade him for going there. So he had a huge presence on the world stage. He had the confrontations that I mentioned before with Mikoyan and Khrushchev. Then the Vietnam War, I won't go into that right today. The aftermath. This is the Great Society, and then the end of the Great Society. The aftermath of the end of the era would be the end of what I would call the liberal era that had brought about these changes: the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Social Security, on through to Medicare and Medicaid, etc. Reuther was involved in healthcare, partly because of his own experiences with the system while he was recovering from his near assassination, and he had an interest in this throughout his career. He, at the end of his career, he formed a committee called the Committee of 100, that was chaired, nominally anyway, by Michael DeBakey, the heart surgeon, and one of the civil rights leaders, not Farmer, but I think I have to look that one up. I'm forgetting which one. One of the prominent civil rights leaders, and another woman that was a medical more of a medical advocate, let's say, than an actual doctor at the time. And then I conclude with basically a catch-all of a number of other interests that Ruther was interested in. I titled the chapter "The Post-American Century" because those advantages of geography, resources, etc., and the lack of the devastation, the Europe and Japan and the other countries that were deeply affected by the two world wars had recovered. So that disadvantage was not present for them. And, the geographical patterns and so forth that were particularly prominent for the industrial age were less a part of the, less of an advantage for the, the information age, I guess we'll call it. So that's a brief run through the book. It's biographical about Ruther, but it also contains a lot of other stories and highlights a number of other people. So I see that there's a lot of questions here. I'm going to try to read them. If we can take the, that off the screen now. Thanks, Clive, for expanding it so that I was able to read it. Okay, I'm back. I really meant that to go a little bit earlier, but I hope it wasn't too bad of a distraction. Okay, I'm going to try to read. I have well, let me show you the book. Here is the book. You can see it's fairly hefty. Uh, as I said, it can be read in, it doesn't have to be read in order. Each chapter pretty much stands alone. A lot of them were written, that way and then organized a bit later. So too much information. Okay, sorry. I 1 minute ago, very, very interesting information from the past. Thank you. I 1 minute ago, as the other grew up during this time, as someone else who grew up during this time, I don't remember hearing or of this individual. You bring an amazing story to life that was not well known. Thank you. I 1 second ago, where did you get this information? Well, I did a lot of research. I lived through part of these times. I wasn't around in the 1930s. I think the first one of the first memories I have of anything happening outside of my own neighborhood or my own house was I was sitting on a wall, let's say, around our driveway at our my first house that I was living in, a rental house in Somerville, and I knew that something had happened. It was actually when Roosevelt died. So I would have been roughly 4 years old at the time. I remember my mother's brother was a soldier in the Pacific Theater. So I remember talking about that her in the house. I remember going to Elizabeth when the fleet arrived. I'm not sure exactly. It was sometime after the end of the war, at least the end of the war in Europe. And it was, I don't know, it must have been something like what the German batteries were looking at when the fleet arrived over Normandy, only maybe even more so in their case. But there was just this immense expanse of boats in the harbor, of the fleet returning and the servicemen returning. So I remember that as a kid. And I do remember, the civil rights movement. I was in graduate school at the time of the Vietnam War and was active in movements around it and so forth. I think that I spent more time doing that than I should have. I think it did, have an effect on my own career. Uh, uh, and But we were quite involved with the different movements during that period. Uh, yeah, I remember my parents, always listened to this same radio station at night while we were at dinner, uh, and it was like WOR out of New York City. Uh, it had there was the news with Gabriel Heater and the sports with Stan Lomax, etc. And the last thing was uh, the views of Fulton, oh God, what was his name? Fulton Lewis Jr., who was more or less the Rush Limbaugh of his day, not quite as vitriolic or anything as him. But he was always giving a pretty right-wing view of the news. My parents being Republicans at the time and me not knowing any better, didn't take them, didn't seriously question what he was saying. But he was always on about Ruther, etc. So, he brought Ruther to my attention. I'm not exactly sure what he was on about some of the time. Some of the times it seemed favorable, and some of the times not so. Yeah, I remember doing this. I worked at Johns Manville in Manville. It was the asbestos plant. In the summer during my college years. It was one of my summer jobs for a couple of years, and it was a unionized shop, but it was a very poorly unionized shop. Uh, I was in H building, and I remember when I was hired, the person hiring me, who was somebody I knew, but I won't say how I knew, use the N word. Do you mind working in this at this particular building with? And he used the N word. No, I have no reason to mind, working there. And so when I got there, the African Americans in the plant, it was still predominantly a white workforce. The African American were far outnumbered by the number of whites. The foremen were both the foremen, the night and the day foremen, were white, and that no, but that was it. None of the summer help was black, so they didn't. Any of the black students that needed a job in the summer had better look elsewhere. So we were working in this plant. We didn't know how dangerous it was. I was the mixer man, which meant that I was delivered, 50-pound bags of asbestos and 50-pound bags of Silex or whatever was part of the mixture. You dump. You have this gauge that goes up, to a high point. You dump when it gets down below the red line. You dump in the asbestos. You dump in the bags of the Silex. You pull a lever that lets down some of the scrap that's being used in the mixture, and then the needle goes back up. And if you have to go to the bathroom was located. There was the front part of the building was the factory, and then the back part of the building, which was just as long, if not longer, was the warehouse where they stored the stuff that was ready to be on its way to be shipped out. So it was halfway down the hall of this other building. So you fill it up as fast as you can, run down to the bathroom and try to get back before the needle was below the red line. So they had a very weak union. I was surprised that I was making the same money as a part-time college kid working there for the summer that the people working on the job regularly were getting. And so I was very attuned to the working conditions in the plant and etc. So that was part of my bringing up. And I don't know what the original question is. I'm meandering, but let me see if there's another question here. I might have some that are up earlier that I didn't get to. Do you have any short? Let me see if I can read this. I'm sorry about this. Have any stories about the Italian? Is that right? Italian Italians in America. Well, I lived in Somerville growing up. The neighboring town was Raritan, which was, I would say, a good 80% or more Italian. So I went to school with a lot of Italians. I had a girlfriend in high school, Italian. So I know, but by this time, most of the people I knew were pretty much third, maybe second, at least the second, if not third generation Italians. So they were no different, really than Irish Americans or Dutch Americans, let's say, uh, etc. So I have no particular firsthand knowledge about what kind of hardships the Italians face. Now, doing research, the Italians were very much discriminated against. Even if you go back to the Hall of Fame voting in baseball, um, the year Joe DiMaggio retired, they changed the rules. Instead of a person being eligible to be voted into the Hall of Fame the first year after they retired, you had to wait 5 years. Except they made an exception for the candidates that were coming up that time, which was Joe DiMaggio. So there was an exception. They could have voted Joe DiMaggio into the Hall of Fame, back on his first ballot. But they didn't. It took them 3 ballots before. They didn't wait the 5 years, but they didn't put him in the first year. So there was some latent discrimination against Italian Americans. Even quotes an Italian American hero like Joe DiMaggio, back in the 50s. He retired back then. A lot of the immigrants, the Southern European immigrants, etc., were not especially states, but a lot of them were recruited to the Greeks, the Italians, Eastern Europeans, the Poles. The Poles were particularly desirable because they were particularly big, people that could work in the mines, could work in the factories, and so they were a particularly desirable set of immigrants for the industrialists. One of the things that I have in the first chapter about the American century was one of the people I mentioned a bit later on is Henry Adams. So Henry Adams, a descendant of 2 presidents, and part of the Adams family, not the ghoulish Adams, but the prominent Adams of Braintree, etc. He was very much, I have a quote on there where, one of the things that was up, he expressed the anti-Semitism, let's say, of this, maybe of this particular group. I don't know about his forefathers. I don't think they were particularly so. But, the Brahmins of Boston were not particularly sympathetic to the Jews. So there's an a writing of his that describes his anti-Semitism. But also they were opposed to the industrialists, because they saw the industrialists as this new money that was taking the political power away from them, that was that weren't of their class, that they and of course they saw the immigrants taking the political power from them too, particularly the Irish in Boston. So they weren't too happy about either the industrial class, the people that were bringing a lot of these immigrants in. Not so much the Irish. There's potato famine and so forth there. But other, the Southern Europeans, the Eastern Europeans, etc., that they didn't particularly want in the country. A lot of the Italian workers actually ended up going back, and some of them came, went home, came back again. Some of them just came and went home, and a lot of them just came and stayed. A lot of them were working on these construction projects like the tunnels and the emerging skyscrapers and so forth, and put into these very dangerous types of jobs. So yeah, I do know the stories about that, but my experience with the Italian American third generation people that were every bit as Americanized, let's say, as I was. And okay, any more? If I can scroll up here. I think there were a lot of questions that I didn't answer that were earlier, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to scroll up. I don't know what my time is like, because I know that I've talked a lot and I'm going to be hoarse. But if there are any more questions, if somebody asked a question earlier that I didn't answer, if you're still around and want to ask it again, now would be a good time to do it. Or not. Oh, somebody just asked a question. Well, thank you for the Fairgoers event, I guess. I can't read it. It looks like a question mark. See, I'm sorry. I hope next time I'll try to get these set to be even bigger. I set ago, the question I sent ago, when can I see you again in your booth? Well, I'm going to be in the booth again tomorrow at noon Eastern time. I hope to put some of these materials that I have on on another display, put them on YouTube. I got this conferencing software package that I'm just learning how to use, and I'm consulting with my son who knows how to use it better. So I'm going to try to develop other materials that probably will be around on the booth and by the end of the week anyway, if not sooner. So I'll be in the booth again tomorrow. Thank you for those comments, and thank you. A lot of the comments that I read anyway were quite kind, so I want to thank you for them. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm not sure how much time is left, but if there are any more questions, I'm still here. Whoops! Somebody's sending me a telephone. Sorry. That sounds like the organizers probably telling me to get off the stage. So for those of you that are interested, I'll be there in the booth again tomorrow at 12. Thank you very much for attendance. Bye now.